Testes, testes, 1, 2, 3. Testes. Hello, and welcome to this video where I'm going to be walking you through my process for drawing this head study focusing on the fat pads of the face. As far as supplies for this drawing, I'm going to be using a 5.6 millimeter pencil holder. It says graphite pencil. The brand, it says Q-Lox. And I just got this on eBay. I think it was around $12 or something. But I really loved it. I just thought it was just the coolest thing. You don't have to sharpen your pencil because that lead just comes out. You can make it as long as you want, and then you can, if you want to shape the end of the lead, you can do that with just a sheet of sandpaper or something like that. But then I also got these colored artists lead. In this video, I'm going to be using the black drawing lead as well as the light brown sepia. Sepia? Really cool. The paper pad that I'm using is just 24 by 19 inch Bristol paper. It's 100-pound paper. And I have been working out lately, and I think it's been paying off because this 100-pound paper, it didn't even feel like 100 pounds. It's always nice when you see those gains. It felt lighter, to be honest. So I was actually inspired by this drawing by Bradwynn Jones, and he did this drawing going over the fat pads, and so that's what was my inspiration for this drawing that I'm going to be doing. If you liked this, you might like his video as well. All right, and then I'm just using my iPad for the reference. And this is the reference image. If you're interested in drawing, you should really check out the Proco YouTube channel and the Proco courses. Stan Prokopenko, I work with him, and he just does an amazing job. This video isn't sponsored by Proco, though if you'd like to sponsor me, Stan, I'd be more than happy to take your money. The figure sculpting course and the portrait sculpting course are our sponsor. Those courses I teach. And so if you're interested in sculpting, I would recommend getting those courses. They're well worth it. So starting off with the Loomis head, you can see I've drawn in that circle and then cut off the side plane of the face, brought down the shape of the jaw and the bottom of the chin, and I'm just going through and drawing in some guidelines so that hopefully all of the features will be relatively accurate and line up with the corners of the mouth, the eyes, the nose. Those things are all very tricky, and so drawing in some guidelines really helps out. This was actually taken from a video that I just made that goes over sculpting the fat pads of the face, and so here you can see this simplified head sculpture available on my online store that I've taken some brown clay and just laid in those fat pads, and then once those guidelines are in place, I'm coming in starting to add some details. And now I'm focusing a little bit more in on that 3/4 view outline of the face. Get some indication of the chin. Here we have that submental fat pad of the chin. And then come in, lay in the ear. Fairly simple, just going for using pretty much straight lines here and there and looking for angle changes more than trying to capture the curvy lines. Back of the head, and put in some mass for the hair. A little bit. And there's the jawline and the back of the neck, and an indication for the collar. And I've tried to really give you, pretty much every stroke, though sometimes I might skip a few, but I wanted you guys to see, each stroke of the pencil, though between each stroke I'm going back looking at the image, and so this drawing took like twice as long as this video will be, just because after every stroke I go and spend maybe 2 or 3 times as long just looking at the reference image and then coming back and just adding these strokes. I'm going to come in and solidify some of these lines that I've outlined with that that outline of the face. We got the cheek coming here, and then this mass right here, this bump right here is the nasolabial fat pad. Comes down just right here. Probably my favorite. If I had to choose one fat pad of the face, that would probably be my favorite one. The nasolabial fat pad contributes to the nasolabial crease, just right here. And same thing with the nose, just darkening and kind of solidifying the line work of those features that I've already kind of drawn in. The nose. And you can see that I'm kind of jumpy with my strokes, just kind of going over it again and again. I'd like to get to the point where I could just do one stroke, and especially like longer strokes that are just clean and that line work, but that takes a lot of practice, and I haven't been drawing for a while, and so I'd like to do more drawings though. And if this video is successful, if there's enough people that like and subscribe and all that, if you make the little squiggly line that shows the likes and subscribes, just make that bloop go up a little bit, then I'll probably be doing more of this stuff like this, and I'd love to because I really love drawing. But that's something that I'd like to work on, is just getting a little bit smoother of lines coming in. And drawing in the ear, indication of the ear, that other side of the collar. And now I'm going to switch, so I was using that black drawing lead, and now I'm going to switch to the light brown sepia. Sepia? Is it sepia or is it sepia? Sepia. I don't know. Comment below. Or just, don't. Okay, we're going to come in and actually lay in that nasolabial fat pad on that side, on both sides. The nasolabial fat pad. Just below the nasolabial fat pad is the superior jowl fat. So the superior jowl fat right there, and then below that is the inferior jowl fat. It's inferior. And then up at the cheek, we have the medial cheek fat pad. The medial cheek fat pad, that's kind of that triangle shape. Medial cheek fat pad. Middle of the forehead, we have the central forehead fat pad. Central forehead fat pad is right in the middle of the forehead. Then on either side, we have the medial forehead fat pads. And then coming in and laying in that lateral orbital fat pad. Lateral orbital. So the orbit, the eye socket, lateral orbital out from the eye socket. Pretty self-explanatory. Another self-explanatory fat pad is the middle cheek fat pad. That's this one right here. Just goes right in the middle of the cheek. Just give me a kiss right there in the middle cheek fat pad. Ask your sweetheart, hey, can you kiss me just in the middle cheek fat pad? And we'll see what happens. And then between that middle cheek fat pad and the ear is the lateral temporal fat pad. So the temples right here, if you're massaging your temples, lateral temporal fat pad comes down right here and then goes towards that angle of the jaw. And then coming to the chin, we have the premental fat pad. That's the fat pad that's right on your chin, right here. I got a butt chin. If you think that was funny, you have to be mental. You're either mental or you're premental. The premental fat pad. That might help you remember. Word association. Underneath the premental fat pad, we have the submental fat pad. You can remember that because when you have a sub at school, they have a double chin, they're fat, and so you look at their double chin and you remember sub. That's the submental fat pad. Just don't tell them that. Okay, in the orbits, or the eye sockets, there's actually two fat pads. There's the superior orbital fat pad and the inferior orbital fat pad. So, and they're kind of just two half moon shapes that kind of squish around the eye. When you have bags underneath your eyes, that's the inferior orbital fat pad. The inferior orbital fat pad. Those bags underneath your eyes. that fat substitute teacher with bags underneath her eyes, those bags are the inferior orbital fat pads. The inferior orbital fat pads. And now I'm coming in and just kind of defining and solidifying those outlines to those fat pads. All of these fat pads. And the fat pads, the reason that I'm using an older gentleman for the reference is because they really become a lot clearer as you age. When you're younger, the fat pads kind of all blend together very smooth, the skin is taut. And as you age, the fat pads actually shrink and they move down with age, and so the space in between the fat pads becomes more visible, and then your face looks more aged. And so it's just easier to see on an older person, those fat pads. Though sometimes you can see them quite clearly on babies too. I did a baby sculpture, and those fat pads are really prominent as well. Okay, so now I'm gonna come in with that black pencil again. So I've switched back, and I'm going to start laying in some of the shadow shapes for this drawing. And what I really love, one of my favorite things about drawings is when they just have a really interesting transition between the light and shadow shapes. And so like the core shadow that I'm laying in here in the chin. And when that's interesting, and when there's a variation and it just looks very convincing, I just think that a drawing at this stage where you're laying in that transition between the shadows and the highlights, I just think it can look really cool. And so I'm just trying to vary between soft transitions and then some of these hard transitions for the shadows and things. And so anywhere where I think, oh, that's a cast shadow, I'm going to make it hard, even though I'm not seeing much of, this in the actual reference. And I'm trying to use those fat pads as a guide onto how those shadows should be placed in the face. How I should put those shadow shapes. Here I'm coming in, adding some lateral temporal fat pad onto that lateral temporal fat pad. I'm still learning the names of the fat pads. Lateral temporal fat pad. Now I'm coming in, adding in this W shape under the mouth, this W right here. That's a really important feature and really interesting feature. And if you want to get the mouth right, it's important to have that, especially when you're sculpting. It's subtle, but it's there. Coming in, adding some shadow to the nose, and then some cast shadow. And I'm going to come in and try to define the shadow shapes of the eyes. So I'm not thinking about it as drawing eyes. I'm just thinking about what is the shape of the shadow look like, and how does it relate to those fat pads that I've already laid in. And then I kind of get an outline of that, and then I'm just going to fill it in quickly with some shading. Same thing on the other side. Maybe a little bit softer of a shadow here. And getting that rough shape of the eye shadow. I'm going to come in and add some more of that soft W shape under the mouth. And give a little bit more indication around this mustache, this mustachioed man. Okay, coming in, adding some of the forehead wrinkles. The fat pads of the forehead, they're really usually, even with overweight people, even with that fat substitute teacher, they usually aren't very pronounced, and so there's not a lot of fat stored in those up here, even on old people or people that are overweight or obese. And the plane change that I give an indication right there, this plane change that comes right here, that's the superior temporal line. It starts at the frontal bone, comes over. It's pretty pronounced on me, you can see it. And that's an important feature, gives an indication when you're drawing the Loomis head, kind of the plane change between the side of the head and the front of the head. Really important feature to lay in, whether you're drawing or sculpting. And coming in, shading, Adding some of the shading in. And coming in and adding some of those wrinkles of the neck, a little bit thicker. And I didn't do all of the wrinkles. I was kind of selective on what wrinkles that I chose to put in. So, and then we're going to come in and just add some texture, some fun lines to the hair. A little bit of shading here and there. Thinking about the forms as just shapes, like shadow shapes. That's something you hear a lot if you watch drawing videos, but it really is important to just think of it as almost abstract shadow shapes rather than thinking of it as hair or anything like that. And some shading around the lips, some cast shadow from that mustache. And shading right there. A little bit more shading under the chin. And now I'm trying to darken those shadow shapes. We'll just come in from different directions and make that shadow a little bit darker. And coming into the ear and giving a little bit more of an indication of that little Y shape that's inside of the ear. And just looking at those shadows. Some blending just by hand, blending it a little bit. This pencil, this particular black drawing lead, it didn't blend that well, but that's okay. So it doesn't smudge, which is the nice thing. So if you're interested in a lead that doesn't smudge, this didn't seem to smudge very much. And there's the smudgeness. And I'm just gonna lay in some shadows really quick around the head that just hopefully help the head come out from the background a little bit more. I would often get the critique in college that I didn't spend enough time on the background, that I was so focused on the figure in the middle, and then I kind of quickly would just lay in a background really fast. But that's just how I am as an artist. I just find people so much more interesting than the background and other things. And so I think, like, when I'm drawing or something, or when I'm sculpting, it's like the person is the number one thing, and then if there's fabric or other things, they just don't interest me as much. I'm so interested by people. People are so interesting. And just adding some darkness on some of these lines, coming in, adding some wrinkles around the eyes, just a couple, and some darker line work. Same thing on the other eye. Coming underneath and adding some dark lines. Same thing with the collar. This is kind of fun watching myself draw. You're watching me, watching an old man studying his fat pads. So look at us. Just an inception of confusion. Coming around, again, trying to maybe darken some of these or smooth out some of this transitions between dark and light shapes. This is really what most of the drawing is just paying attention to those transitions between light and dark. And that's my favorite thing. I feel like if you can get that convincing, you can almost just leave the drawing at that stage. Like, you don't even have to put in the shadows as much as I have if you have a really convincing transition between the light and shadows and you've laid that in, that core shadow. Softening that core shadow around the zygomatic arch of the cheekbone. And let's come in and add a little bit darker lines in the hair. Using the side of the pencil. For that, I'm just using the side of the pencil and just coming and making those sharp lines in the hair. just to add some texture, make it a little bit more interesting. Though I'm going to leave the hair pretty white. He's got white hair. And there you have it. One drawing with an indication of the fat pads of the face. If you'd like to see more videos like this, comment below what you'd like to see. If this video just blows the heck up, I'll probably do more. There's links below to my online store, my ebook, An Artist's X-Ray Vision, that you might find helpful, my online courses on portrait sculpting and figure sculpting, and my online store where I have a simplified version of the head that you can purchase so you too can lay in the fat pads of clay onto a plaster head. So, all right, stay productive, stay creative. I'll see you in the next one.